Alright, so this is part 2 of chapter 22. Gregor popped another piece of chocolate into the little rat's mouth, and it was gobbled up. The Bane seemed to think better of him now that he had given it chocolate. It relaxed a little, back into his body, which made it easier to hold on to. "You think we're almost out of here?" Gregor said as they swept out of a tunnel. "See for yourself," said Eris. Gregor shone the flashlight around the place they'd just entered. Lying on the floor were Goldshard, Snare, and the third rat. "No! What are we doing back here?" he gasped. "Perhaps you should try navigating," said Eris. What with him insisting on taking the Bane, having no sword, and being pretty worthless in general at the moment, Gregor could tell the bat had lost patience with him. Okay, I'm sorry," said Gregor. "It is our scent, Overlander," said Eris. "They track us with such ease. I cannot lose them." "Hey, I know," said Gregor. "Maybe we can trick them." He'd seen some movie once where a guy running from bloodhounds had fooled them. "We need to confuse their noses." But with what? Gregor ripped the bandage from his arm. It was soaked with blood and pus and ointment. "Fly around the cone, Eris. I need to touch the top of every tunnel." Eris followed his instructions, if not his plan. "Why do we do this?" Gregor reached out the bandage and swiped it along the inside of every tunnel entrance as they passed it. "I'm just trying to spread our scent around." They completed the full circle, hitting each tunnel opening. Gregor tossed the bandage up, the last one. "They come," warned Eris. Get out now," said Gregor. Eris dipped into a tunnel they had not yet tried. After about 30 seconds, they could hear the rats reaching the cone, and they were confused. Different rats were calling for them to chase down different tunnels. A big argument broke out, and then the sound of fighting. It grew softer as they moved away, until Gregor could no longer hear it at all. Eris zigzagged down a tunnel, and this one opened out over a nice, wide, shallow stream. "I must stop for a moment. I must drink." Eris landed on the edge of the stream, panting. He dunked his face in the water, gulping it down. Gregor got down and scooped up handfuls of water for himself and the Bane. The stream was not too deep, but the current was fairly strong, and he didn't want the baby being swept away. Eris raised his wet face. "I have only just thought of something," said Eris. "This stream. Where do you suppose it goes?" "I don't know. A bigger stream? Maybe a river eventually, or..." Gregor caught Eris's drift. On his very first night in Regalia, when he'd tried to escape, he'd followed the water out of the palace. It had led to a river that had led to the waterway. It's sure worth a try. So they think that it should lead to the waterway. Gregor hauled the Bane onto Eris's back, and they took off again. It was not too promising for a while. The main thing about the stream was that it was long, and it had as many twists and turns as the tunnels in the maze. Gregor could feel Eris's wings slowing. He was going to have a real rest soon. But to stop in the maze was certain death. The rats would catch up to them. Gregor had no sword. The baby would begin to cry again, and then they would... "A river," Eris puffed out. "A river is at hand." In another minute, they followed the stream out of the tunnel into a huge cavern. A river ran through it. They were out of the maze. Eris flew up high above the water. There were stony cliffs along the sides. "Any rats around?" asked Gregor. "Just the one on my back," said Heiress. "You want to pull over and take a break?" said Gregor. "In a short while. I want to put more distance between the Gnawers and us. They will be coming, Overlander. We have the Bane," said Eris. "Yeah, I bet they hate that," said Gregor. He petted the Bane's head. It was getting used to him now. It curled up against him and gave a big yawn. "You've had a pretty big day, huh, little guy?" It didn't take long for it to fall asleep. They flew a while in silence. Then Eris spoke in an odd voice. "Overlander, I think I know this place. I think we both do." "What?" said Gregor. How could he possibly know where they were? Shine your light down, said Eris. Gregor obeyed. There below them was the river, very wide now and very strong. Hanging down from the high banks on either side of it were the remnants of a broken bridge. Oh, said Gregor, and the memory of that day flashed before his eyes. Running across the bridge, trying to go back for Boots, Ripred carrying him by his backpack, and the bridge swung dizzyingly below, being smacked to the ground by Ripred's tail while the rat and Luxa and Henry and Gox had hacked away at the ropes that held the bridge, and the pack of rats catching up to the cockroaches and his baby sister, and it was the place where Tick had died. You're right, said Gregor. How did we end up here, do you think? The tankard, the labyrinth, and what remains of this bridge are all in the rat's domain, said Eris. At least now we have some sense of where we are. The bat coasted in and landed on the riverbank across from where the bridge had been hacked off. It will be safer on this side. The rats would have great difficulty swimming the river, which is, as you know, filled with flesh-eating fish. Gregor climbed off Eris's back, holding the Bane, who was snoring softly. They were at the mouth of a tunnel. He ran his flashlight beam over the surrounding rocks, remembering how they'd been filled with waiting rats on their first visit. Now the rats were empty. Anything in the tunnel? He asked Eris. Excuse me. The bat shook his head. Not as far as I can tell. I believe we are safe for the moment. Overlander, I must rest. He could see Eris's weary eyes starting to shut. You go ahead and sleep. I'll keep watch, he said. And Eris, you were pretty amazing back there. I was not bad, Eris agreed and promptly fell asleep, his back to the tunnel wall. Gregor trained his flashlight down the tunnel. If any intruders appeared, he would be ready. He sat cross-legged on the ground with the Bane on his lap. The baby stirred restlessly in its sleep, probably reliving the trauma of the last few hours. He patted its back to quiet it. The Bane's fur was stiff with its mother's dried blood. The baby snuggled closer to him. It was so much like holding Boots. Boots! Why wasn't he crying about her? He had cried for a roach in a cave just across the river there, but hadn't shed one tear for his sister. He remembered how Luxa had told him, in that same cave, that she hadn't cried since her parents died. It had been that bad. Maybe something like that was happening to Gregor. His fingers traced the outline of one of the baby's soft ears. So, it turned out Sandwich had been right again. The rats had killed Boots, and he could not kill the Bane. Although Gregor didn't think he could have killed the Bane, even if Boots had survived. Or could he have? If he had thought that only one of them could live, he didn't know, but it didn't matter anymore. Now what, he thought. Now what? He had to think clearly. He had to figure out what to do with the Bane. He couldn't take it back to the rat's land. Goldshard had lost her life trying to protect it from her fellow rats. If he showed up with it in Regalia, he bet the humans would decide to kill it. If they let it live, which seemed unlikely, the rats would definitely overrun the city trying to get it back. For a brief moment, he wondered if he could take it home with him. But he knew his mom wouldn't have any part in raising a 10-foot rat, especially when Boots had... Okay, so what did that leave? Nothing, pretty much. He looked out over the water. This was such a sad place. Not just because of Tick, but because when he'd come through here on the first quest, he'd been in a party of 10. And of that 10, how many were still alive? He did the math in his head. 3. Only 3. Tick had died here. Henry and Gox were lost when they rescued his father. Luxa, Aurora, Temp, and Precious Boots drowned at the tankard. The only ones left alive were he and Eris and Ripred. Ripred. He was going to go crazy when he found out Gregor hadn't killed the Bane. He wanted the Bane dead. That's why he'd brought Twitch Tip and tried to teach Gregor echolocation. But then Rip Red hadn't known the Bane was a baby either. Would that make any difference to the rat? Maybe. Just maybe it would. Gregor felt a plan beginning to form in his head. Eris awoke after about 3 hours, famished. He went down to the river and came back with a large fish, not one of the flesh-eating kind. The Bane awoke and wolfed down the fish with the bat, while Gregor scraped the mold off a piece of cheese and finished the last of the bread. While they ate, he bounced his plan off Eris. Okay, I have an idea about what to do with the Bane. I am listening, said Eris. This tunnel. It leads back to Rip Red's nest, said Gregor. Does it? Said Eris. Yeah, remember? Twitch-Tip said his nest was where we first met him, and we first met him at the other end of this tunnel, said Gregor. Oh, yes, after we had fought the spinners, said Eris. Right, so I say we go find Rip Red and give him the Bane and let him deal with it, said Gregor. Eris opened his mouth to object, but Gregor held up his hand. Wait, only tell me why we can't do it if you can come up with a better plan. There was a very, very long pause. I do not have a better plan, but this one has no possible good endings, said Eris. Probably not, said Gregor. So should we give it a try? All right, that is the end of chapter 22. So your question to answer is, what do you think Rip Red's going to say and do when Gregor and Eris bring him the Bane? Later.